All right, let's see. I don't know how much delay it's gonna have. Anyway, so yeah, good evening. I am the Daily Satanist, Sean RR for some of you, many other names. Anyway, I wanted to respond to Summer Thunder's, a fellow Satanist, most recent video called Time to Grow Up. And I have some issues with this, with his way of thinking, not personally, but just, I mean, it's stuff I don't agree with at a personal level. So it's not like, it's not the end of the world, you know? Now let's see, I'm just cleaning up some stuff on my desktop. There we go. This is my first live stream on YouTube, so we'll see how it goes. Now, so he starts off the video with some nice calm music, as he always does. So Time to Grow Up is the title, of course.
Hello, I'm going to name this video Time to Grow Up because that's what I'm feeling as far as the satanic community is concerned.
So your first assumption is that there is a set satanic community. I do not believe this to be the case. I don't think there's such a thing. There's not really such a thing as a satanic community. There is more like a satanic community by proxy, by the fact that just a few of us identify with the label Satanism doesn't mean we make a community. And I've got a point to demonstrate when it comes to the LGBT, etc. community. You yourself have agreed that that it's not necessarily in the sense that every gay person and every let's call that alternative sexuality, I don't know, non-cisgender / non-hetero, like heterosexual people belong to that community. It's not necessarily the case, and such is the case with Satanism. It's not because several people identify with the label Satanist that they form a community in any way, or that there is any global will to form a unified community. In fact, I argue that the very nature of Satanism is to disagree to agree, which is like the opposite of agree to disagree, in the sense that you don't. I mean, it's like the biggest proof I can have is the very different satanic communities that exist, satanic communities, so to speak, that exist. Such as the Church of Satan, the Satanic Temple for our Levian friends. Then there's, on the atheistic side, some of the ONA, or Order of Nine Angles, consider themselves Satanists. Some don't. Some say that the ones that consider themselves Satanists are not true ONA members. I don't know. You have Joy of Satan, which of course have had their share of justified controversy because of their neo-Nazi kind of views and stuff. Then, I mean, you have this plethora of Satanists and Satanisms that are just way too distinct, way too different for anyone to claim there is such a thing as a satanic community, or as the satanic community. It's not the way it's working right now. It's not the way it's supposed to work, in my opinion.
It really is time for us to get down to work. It's time for us to build something permanent.
Now, you say build something permanent, but at the same time, Satanism is all about change. It's all about non-permanency. It's about constant. Well, I'm tempted to say revolution, but that just brings even worse, even worse thoughts to my head. Anyhow, what I mean is that Satanism is not about building something permanent. It's about creating something for yourself and destroying it and recreating it, and every iteration make it better. But there is nothing we should build together, in my opinion. We can build our own individuality together. I mean, you can always help someone else through advice, for example, if they're struggling to build their own identity, but that doesn't mean you are both going to build the same identity. So from that point on, what differentiates Satanism from other belief systems is that it's not religion based. Religion means quite literally from Latin, I think. It translates into French very well. Relier, which means to link together, to join together. And Satanism is not about that. In fact, Satanism is about being able to free yourself from those links.
It's going to last, and it's time for us to revive our religion in a real sense.
And that is where the title of these rooms come from. I don't believe Satanism to be a religion. I just think Satanism is a belief system. It's a conjunction of a very personal, a very individual thoughts, philosophies, moral ethics that are assimilated to the personality or to the archetype of Satan, even if like independently, if you consider it to be a real or a fake entity. You and I consider Satan to be a real entity, but those that don't are not exempt from the fact that Satanism is a belief centered around the individual and the individual relationship with the archetype they hold Satan to be. And even if we both believe in Satan, you'll agree that we both have a very different relationship with Satan. We both have a very different understanding of what Satan is and who he is, and we don't perceive him the same, and no Satanist does.
Terms. And to really get away from the whole thing of basically being a kind of service industry for hip atheist humanism.
I mean, yeah, I get what you're coming from. This is especially true for the Temple of Satan, who use, in my opinion, Satanism as an excuse to have some kind of shock value to their not very shocking like fights and ideology and stuff like that. They are extremely tame for Satanist standards, but I guess when you use the label Satanist to push a political agenda, you come across as shocking, and that's why I have. That's where my issue with the Temple of Satan comes from, is that they unite together as a community under the banner of a belief system that is all about non-community, all about the individual, and they try to push collective oriented rights, which some have underlining individual, some have like underlining advantages for the individual, and those I support. However, the way they're doing it, I don't think it's worth of being called satanic in any way. A Satanist fights for himself, and through the fight for himself, he fights. He can be convinced to fight for others if he sees there is some kind of advantage to helping others for himself. Remember that Satanism is about the positive egoism. You do things for yourself. Doing things for yourself doesn't mean you're not doing anything for anyone else. If doing something for someone else means that you get something in return, whether it be on the short or long term, then it's fair game. However, I do not think, it's just a gut feeling. I cannot prove it, but I have the feeling that the Satanic Temple is not on that. It's not doing that. I feel like the Satanic Temple is taking the imagery, the shocking imagery of Satanism to attract gullible people into joining their own political agenda, which, from the perspective of the Satanic Temple as an organization, is satanic, because they are pretty much convincing people to help them. But I don't think the people who help them are actually Satanists, in the sense that they're following a collective instead of following their own personal will. Of course, this is not going to be the case for every person that supports the Satanic Temple. As I said, every Satanist is different, can have their own reasons, and they're deeply personal and individual. So I'm not going to throw like every supporter of the Satanic Temple in the same basket, because that would be not only stupid but inaccurate, and it would go like completely against my own point. So I'm gonna shoot myself in the foot.
For just kind of like metal / goth subcultures.
I take offense to that. Oh man, I'm not even going to comment on that, because I mean, it is true though. It is true though. Much of the satanic, let's use your own terms. Much of the satanic community, or like the bulk of people who have some affiliation to Satan in one way or another. It's not all of them. I know many that come from very diverse settings, but we have to admit that a good proportion, not even the majority, but just a good proportion of them do come from settings that liberate, that untaboo, like demystify and de-taboo, like de-prohibit, or encourage like the dark side, so to speak, of things. They don't put a gigantic moral barrier into some way of thinking, into more radical mindsets, which attracts people from those settings as well. Because in Satanism, we are encouraged to think for ourselves, and not be hindered by any moral or ethical barriers that might have been forced upon us.
And stuff like that, really. We need to get serious about stuff. And stop wasting your time with just putting out empty stuff on social media, obviously.
Well, I left social media. Well, I did not leave social media. I left personal social media. I still use professional social media because it's an amazing tool to attract a following and customers, depending on what to do. But usually there's always a way to social mediafy your marketing strategies. So I continue to use social media for pretty much business reasons. But for personal stuff, I've completely left out social media. Also, I wanted to point out that social media is not so bad. I left it because it was not giving me anything personally. But I know a lot of people that have found an amazing tool to keep in contact with people they're far away from, which is comparable to sending mails or being on the phone, etc., but in a more practical and more intuitive way. So I don't think social media as a whole is a bad thing.
I mean, start building. We actually need to start building and creating in an old school fashion, because it's only old school stuff that really works.
Well, the thing here is that old school building of a religion was about killing everyone that did not agree with you. So historically, we can see that the success of religions such as Judaism, Christianism, like the Judeo-Christian belief systems. Their success is partly because of warmongering, but mostly because of the demonization of other religions, in the sense that they used fear-mongering to coerce people into their belief system. Of course, these first-generation fear-mongered people that converted were not true believers, but their offspring were like were already born in this religious setting, so their belief became pretty much indoctrination, and that's how most important religions came to power, by fear-mongering and pledging and waging war on other nations that had different religions and stuff like that, and using the excuse of divine favor when winning wars to justify all the murder and other things. And that is the old way of doing it. It's mixing politics and religion is the best way to get religion to the top, if that's what you intend to do. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess that would work, but you need to understand where we come from, and we are in a society, we are in a modern society. We're not in the old society, and as such, the old ways of building a religion or a community are not necessarily compatible with today's way of doing things, really. I can agree that what people consider today to be actual community building is bullshit. I can agree to that, but the old ways are also bullshit by today's standards. You are not going to get any kind of thing going on in the old setting.
We need to get over our problems with authority. We need to get over our problems with basically being grown-ups, actually. Yeah? We need to get over those things, and we need to get on with building and working.
I don't think Satanism has a problem with authority. I think Satanism has never had a problem with authority. What Satanism has is a tendency to contest that authority, to question and to have reason and to discover the meaning behind the authority's workings, and then agree if the way the authority is acting is something acceptable or not. And you can see that pretty well. Many Satanists have, well, claimed, we cannot know for sure, but many of them have claimed to have had to do things that we would not consider satanic right away, but of which a result is clearly satanic, either by a gain of power or certain perks that they obtain thanks to doing unsatanic things, like willingly putting yourself below someone else in an authority, like as an authority, like accepting the authority of someone else can be a very satanic way of climbing the social ladder. For instance, the financial status ladder, or whatever you want to call it. Remember that Satanism is, first of all, a means to an end. It means that you have your will makes you go that way. It's up to you to achieve that objective, and I truly believe that non-satanic actions can have satanic results, and so we don't really have an issue with authority. It's more like we will not shut our mouth if the current state of authority does not enhance our personal situation. I think you're mistaking Satanists for teenagers. Most Satanists are not teenagers, and most teenagers that become Satanists either grow up by themselves without anyone needing them to tell them, or they just leave Satanism. I was a Satanist teenager, or teenager Satanist, however you want to put it, and I grew, and I want to say grew out of it, but actually grew I grew in it. I grew through that rebellious phase, and that rebellious phase stays today. It doesn't mean I haven't grown up. It's not. I mean, I don't know how can you say that growing up goes through the acceptance, the acceptance of authority in any situation. I don't know. I maybe I'm missing your point entirely. That is completely a fair point. I don't believe that's what you mean, but I fail to see what else could be meant by that. Satanism, in a general sense, do not have a problem with authority in every situation. We just have a problem when authority hinders our own field of action.
So I think this is going to be a short video, really. It's a short message. We need to do work. Dog obviously agrees with that. But yeah, we need to get on with serious work about building a religion. And
that's the thing, that I don't believe Satanism is fit to be a religion. I don't think Satanism should be a religion, because as I said, religion is it's never about the individual. Religion is never about the individual and the current state of the individual. Religion is always about some either community based, meaning that the person is at the service of the community, and I profoundly disagree with that, and I do believe, like, very deeply, that Satanism is the complete opposite of that. Satanism is you as an individual attempting to put the community at your service. That for me is more satanic. Is achieving. I mean, I don't exactly know what you want to achieve. Do you want, like, this official church of something to be made? I don't know.
What actually works for religions? What is it? Does it? Well, one thing.
Well, how do you find works? I'm guessing you're pointing at the success of religion. As I said before, the success of religion is fear-mongering, coercing people into belief, coercing people into indoctrinating their children to believe. It's about forcing people into their system, whether they like it or not, by either convincing them by argumentation, which is, I mean, it's fine by my standards, but many times it happened through violence, many times it happened through blackmailing, many times it happened through indoctrination, which is different than convincing. Many times it goes through processes that undermine the individual freedom of action, like the individual freedom.
It doesn't work is having a kind of cellular structure where you have loads and loads of individuals who basically only meet on social media.
Well, the thing is that that's the thing. We don't. Most of us don't want much else. Most of us don't want to build a long-standing united community because we don't need it. Satanism has existed in one way or another since the dawn of man, in the sense that mentality that I am more important than others, how can I make it so that's a reality? How can I become a master of my own world? That kind of mentality has always existed and perdured through the ages, and sometimes it's less present, sometimes it's more discreet, sometimes it doesn't exist at all, but eventually it always resurfaces. And we are just currently experiencing the most recent resurfacing of that, and we chose the name Satanism for it because we are now equating it with the archetype of Satan. And for many of us have had a personal relationship with Satan himself, if we do believe in him as a literal being. But social media is more than enough, because we're not building anything. We don't need to build anything. Satanism is intemporal because it's an idea that is, in my opinion, innate to the human being.
We need people to build things in their real lives. and we need people to work together.
I mean, we're already working together. I mean, maybe not in the satanic community, so if, as you would like to call it, but in a general sense, humanity has been working together, has been cooperating more than they have in the entire history of humanity. I mean, you can see that very well in international politics. We are so afraid of going against like any other country's interests or stuff like that. That politics, like European politics, are completely freezed because of that. Because no one wants to go against the will of any other country. I mean, of course, you have exceptions because they either feel more powerful or stuff like that, and they completely, disregard the kind of international peer pressure. However, I do believe that humanity is going in the right direction, and humanity doesn't need Satanism, and Satanism doesn't need humanity to take care of it, because Satanism will perdure and humanity will perdure as well. They don't really need each other because both are going to be there for a very, very, very long time. And it is my belief that the Satanism, or at least the idea of Satanism, will stay with humanity until its end.
And we need to get over the constant emphasis on individualism to the exclusion of other things, because. But
that's the whole point of Satanism. The whole point of Satanism is to balance out the exterior with the. I mean, the whole point of Satanism is to consider the individual as an individual. And that goes through individual beliefs, that goes through individual morals, individual ethics. I'm going to say this because that way I'll get it out of the way. For me, morals and ethics is the same thing, really. There's no real distinction between them. Anyway, but Satanism is about having, individual beliefs, individual morals, individual ethics, individual way of doing things, individual perceptions, is the acknowledgement that every person is a single unit that doesn't, whose identity doesn't really need the whose identity and whose existence doesn't depend on the existence or identity of others. I'll agree that when I say identity, I don't mean like your personality, because obviously your personality is going to depend a lot on your surroundings, how you grew up, what kind of influences you've had. I'm not saying that we should avoid influences at all. When I say identity, I mean truly what we do with those influences, because it's not necessarily because someone let's say I have children. I listen to metal and hard rock most of the time. Maybe that child is going to grow up listening to metal, to hard rock and stuff, and suddenly at age 14 he's going to listen to a single rap song. And suddenly he discovers, actually, I don't like metal and hard rock. I like rap. So actually having many sources of influences is beneficial to the construction of a singular, unique identity. But that construction of that identity has to come from the person themselves. Things that religions in a general sense don't allow, and also is partly because of that they have so much success, is that since they try to make identities uniform, they have an easier time making people feel part of something. And when you make, and feeling part of something is actually a very let's use It's just a funny word. Something very evil to do, in the sense that when you make people feel part of a community, you actually have a very, very powerful tool at your disposal. Is that instead of those people instead of these people joining a community because they feel it's similar to what they believe in, they're going to adapt their beliefs, and they're going to change, they're going to be gullible and easily manipulated, so they can remain part of that community. And that is how most religions do that. It's like even the Catholic religion, like the Catholic Church, went through many changes, and they just did, hey, you want to still be considered a Christian, you have to change your views to fit our new kind of views and stuff like that.
Individualism is creative, but it doesn't actually build things in terms of religion.
Well, because it's not supposed to. Satanism is not supposed to build a religion. It's supposed to build an individual, which is like the opposite of a religion.
You need things like a real sense of work, a real work ethic. You need to be able to make sacrifices.
Well, that is something we already do. That is something every Satanist already does in order to enhance themselves, like empower themselves. In many meanings, that has many meanings. Empowering yourself doesn't only mean spiritually. Empowering yourself means also widening your field of action by either financial success, social success as well can widen your field of action very neatly, etc.
And you need to be able to respect authorities.
I mean, yes, if the authority is beneficial to the individual, yeah, sure thing, and it's always very useful in many, especially in the education field. In education, when you respect your teacher, usually your teacher does a better job of teaching you stuff. And once they have nothing else to teach, you can still respect them, of course. I'm not saying like once you've learned everything you have to learn, you can say to your teacher, hey, well, thanks for nothing, old bitch. That is definitely not what I mean. But what I mean is that you don't have to view them as authority anymore. And actually, that is something that happens. I've been in the education field for a couple of years now. Actually more than that. Actually, about 4 years. And what I see is that the more a student achieves the amount of knowledge, not even the amount of experience, but the amount of knowledge that the teacher achieves, the less the authority, the rapport, like the authority relationship, dissolves, and it becomes more and more like it goes through the instead of being teacher and student, it becomes like apprentice and guide. Then it becomes just a person that has a bit more experience, so he gives advice to the person that has theoretically the same knowledge but just not as much experience, and eventually they reach the same level, and at that point they're not even anything relating to authority. I mean, maybe a vestige of that relationship may remain because of social convention, because of social of social workings. Like, I mean, if you got the same teacher for many years, eventually, even if you surpass him in any way possible, you're still going to see him as kind of your teacher. But that is more of a soft authority, a social construct more than an actual authority figure.
And hierarchies, in fact, as well. And it's funny.
Well, yes and no. I mean, as I said, as long as it's beneficial, yeah, sure. But the thing is that you want to instaurate institutions, hierarchies, and authority to build something that is, in my opinion, not very satanic. Which is when someone says to me satanic community, I'm hearing that's the brightest. That's like a bright dark. I don't know. It makes no sense to me. I cannot make any sense of satanic community. There is nothing a satanic community can achieve because we all have different interests, we all have different political opinions, we all have different directions we want to go, and not all of us want the enhancement of humanity, not all of us want the destruction of humanity, not all of us want... We usually tend to be very, very, very homogeneous in our diversity, meaning that I mean, in physics, opposite forces, like equal opposite forces, are going to annihilate each other. That's what happens in a satanic community. A satanic community, by definition, stagnates, simply because you're always going to have disparate and opposite beliefs.
That so many Satanists go on about, I don't know. They kind of go on about stratification and all this sort of thing, and yet none of them could actually accept an authority. It's always like, yeah, I'm it. Well, everybody can't be it. Somebody has to do the work. Yeah, somebody has to do the work. It can't all be done with technology.
Actually, well, I believe we can.
Going by the norms of the modern world will actually get you nothing but being a consumer of the modern world.
Not necessarily, because I mean, if you go by the rules of the old world, you become a consumer of the old world. I mean, how is that any different? Allow me to remind you that the consumer society is nothing, has always existed. It's just that it used to be very, very, very different before. The consumer society used to be only the nobles and the riches and the very rich people that could spend ridiculous amounts of money in very, very, very useless and stupid stuff that they did not need or did not even appreciate. Like, even when they spend money for artists, most of the time they did it because of trends and not because of the actual quality of the work of the artist. And it can be seen very easily that it's not like consumer society has always existed as long as authority has existed, as long as hierarchy has existed. There has always been a consumer society. It's just that it used to be very limited to the people of power and money. And since today we have given access, it's not like instead of giving the average person more power and more money and more wealth to participate in the consumer society, what we did is just lower the prices, lower the entry level for the consumer society to a ridiculous level, in which in most first world countries, even if you have a very, 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 very bad paying job or something, you can still indulge in some way or another in the consumer society. Also, I do not believe that materialism or consumer society is a bad thing. In fact, I believe that thanks to consumer society, we have made many, many, many of the very important technological advances that have allowed us to be where we are today in regards of scientific advancements. Many of those advancements were done or were at least inspired by big companies throwing money researchers, so they make like a new product that is going to be better than the other product, so they can sell it better, etc., make things less expensive and stuff like that. So I'd argue that consumer society has definitely had a positive impact in today's world.
So
not all of it, of course.
If you just want to be a consumer, then that's fine. But if you want to build something, you're going to have to build it old school. You have to look backwards to religions that actually work, cultures that actually work and held together.
What is a religion that actually works for you?
How do we do that? As Satanists, as people who actually believe in Satan as their God, by which I do not mean in a monotheistic sense, but in maybe a henotheistic sense. But we need to actually look upon Satan as our God, and we need to actually have institutions.
But why?
Need to have means of communication.
You commune with Satan. How can you reach that conclusion? The conclusion: Satan doesn't need institutions. We don't need institutions to govern our Satanism. Satanism is about absolute freedom. It's about making your own Satanism. It has been like that since the beginning of time. Satanism. The individual comes first. Satanism comes later. Satanism is just a way to express a certain, like, Satan inspires us to be individuals, and that's why we gave it the name Satanism, because the archetype or the actual being of Satan has pushed us to see that putting oneself first can be an answer, can be a way of doing things. So I think that's the end of your video.
Like I said, he agrees too. Anyway, that's my short message, and I was just going to see to Pickles, my dog, because he wants to go out. Really.
So I'm not gonna say I'm amused, because it's not what I mean. But you have the "Don't Threat of Me" under the LGBT banner above it. The "Don't Threat on Me" that I wholeheartedly agree with, and I think that should give you an idea of what Satanism is about when it comes to authority. We don't refuse authority. It's just that as long as the authority doesn't threat on us, we don't have a problem with it. But if it does, shit's gonna go down.
Anyway, thank you for listening, and see you soon.
Thank you for that video. I wanted to add something to that real quick. So Summer Thunder has I don't know how to speak. Has also posted a blog post on his WordPress. Give me a second. I'll fetch it for you. I'll give it a read, and because I did not read it, like it's not that I did not pay attention to it. It's just that I think I read through it a bit too fast, so I did not understand fully what I was reading. Okay, so this is gonna be a bit complicated because I have this fucking stupid filter. That should work though. There's a fly in front of me. One thing that has persisted with me over the last 18 or 19 years has been a disaffection with elitism in magical spirituality. Something I would see a great deal in the first decade of the 21st century was an arrogant and derisive attitude towards sincere newcomers. I agree with that. From a more bitten old guard, as someone with a deep interest in the occult since the 70s, I found this unnecessary and unseemly. With the advent of the internet, of course, there was a lot of very visible foolishness and immaturity. I mean, yes, I mean the foolishness and immaturity has always been there. It's just that now it's more visible because we're giving a voice to the fool and the immature, which is actually, in my opinion, something very, very, very positive. And it's so much more visible and publicly self-demonstrating than it was in my own youth. You can't let this be encouraged. I disagree. I think Satanism is about taking ideas and pitting them against each other. Debate is always going to bring out some truth out of it, independently of how foolish and immature are both debatants. There's always something that's going to come out of it for at least the people that are looking, that are listening at the debate unfolding. But on the other hand, being an irritable, grouchy spirit in group does nothing for clear communication, and when responding to sincerity is one of your duties, you are frankly failing, and you should know better, because there are sincere people there. Yes, of course there are. I mean, and I argue that most foolish and immature practitioners are actually very, very, very sincere. They just have a skewed understanding of what they're dealing with, which is completely fine, because we all start somewhere, and it's okay. It's okay to be fool and immature, because especially in today's, you're going to pit your ideas against many people, and that's actually going to force you to mature and unfold yourself over time by your own means, because you're going to, I mean, even if you stay closed-minded and you have a debate, you're going to you're going to have a debate about some subject with someone else who might or might not be as full and immature as you are. Eventually, whatever was said during that debate, even if you don't agree with it immediately, that thing's gonna simmer in your head, and those ideas are going to take some place in your mind, and you're eventually going to weed them out or accept them and actually agree with them eventually, even if you don't admit it to the person that you were having the debate with a few moments ago or a few years ago or a few decades ago. And in my opinion, it's the most natural and organic way of developing your own ideas and your own stuff. Is letting your own logic and your own reason show you that you were wrong. Admitting it is, of course, something entirely different. You don't actually need to admit it at any time either. You can just adopt an idea and say, hey, I always thought this, and hopefully no one will notice that you were completely against that idea beforehand. In the case of initiatic occult organization, it is perfectly justifiable that they be exacting and rigorous. Exacting and rigorous in choosing candidates for their work, and the same can go for admission to a priesthood. But for a religion as a whole, it works differently. Again, we're in the sense of a religion. I don't think Satanism is fit to be a religion. I don't think Satanism is a religion, and should. And a religion, most religions are initiatic, by the way. I don't understand how are you making any difference. I made difference between a religion and an initiatic cult. No, you don't need to actually put the OC at the beginning of a cult. It's just like a cult. Religions are cults in a broader sense. And priesthood is initiatic priesthood. Usually happens because you have a certain interest in this, and you are willing to take on the studies that are necessary to better understand that religion, that belief system, so you can actually teach it and stuff like that under a certain criteria, which also gives us the idea of dogma. You cannot separate religion from dogma, in the sense that a priesthood is going to follow a definite dogma. And religion is, and priesthood is necessary for religions, because you always need someone to tell you how to think and what to do. Otherwise, it's not a religion anymore. One of the issues this raises is what constitutes a priesthood and what is its function. Indoctrinating, in my opinion. Guiding. It's supposed to be guiding. It's supposed to be teaching and guiding, but many times it's just indoctrination. In the most basic terms, a priesthood is there to serve the gods, serve its community, and do spiritual work for the laity. I'm gonna need to look up. Oh, the body, lay people. Okay. And we shouldn't forget that every priesthood needs a laity to serve. Yes, but there is no laity. There is no laity in Satanism. In the sense that we are, all of us, practicing worshippers. I mean, I don't call what I practice worship, but in a general sense, I mean, we can technically equate it with it. I don't feel uncomfortable with that. It's not what I would call it, but there is no laity in Satanism, and if a Satanism is a lay person, then he's not a Satanist, because Satanism is about is about working yourself for your own goals or your own spiritual goals. There is meant to be a priesthood and laity, and if the laity supports the priesthood even more has to make sacrifices for the laity. Okay, there is no such thing as a religion of priests, for that is a cult, not a religion. And if that's your definition, and so by your definition, for me, Satanism is a cult. It's not a religion. There is no lay people in Satanism. Applying this to Satanism, there is a place for very kinds of engagement, for priesthood, for monasticism, for hermits and mystics, and for lay Satanists. I don't believe there should be lay. I don't believe a lay Satanist can be called a Satanist. This could all form part of a thriving and healthy Satanism. Yeah, and well, I think that's about what oh, this is not the same. This is not what I wanted to show you. Oh God, no. There you go. So yeah, I think that's about all I had to say for this stream. I have not many other things to talk about. I think that's about it. If I were to sum up my thoughts on what we just were talking about, it would be that Satanism is for me not a religion. It's a collection of belief systems. It's a collection of morals and ethics that we made ourselves as an individual in order to better fit our own personality, our own experiences, and to refuse the dogmatic approach to spirituality that many religions have. It also allows us to empower ourselves by putting us above everyone else from a certain perspective. It doesn't prevent us from helping others. It's just that we won't help others if it doesn't bring us anything positive in any way. So yeah, for me, Satanism is not a religion. It's a belief system. It's a spirit. It's a path. It's a spiritual, ideological, and lifestyle path that is made by the individual for the individual, with complete disregard for any concept of community or necessity to feel accepted by anyone else, or without any necessity to feel justified. We are Satanists because we can and we will, nothing else. I think that's gonna be it for this stream. This is my first stream. I am the Daily Satanist. You can call me Sean. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.